My grandmother kept a disposable camera in her kitchen drawer her entire life. Not for special occasions, just for Tuesday afternoons when the light came through the window a certain way, or when a neighbor's cat wandered into the garden, or when she made a pie that came out particularly well. She'd photograph ordinary things like they were worth remembering, because to her, they were. When she passed, we found 11 of those cameras in her bedside table, developed, labeled, stacked neatly in a shoebox with a rubber band around them. She labeled the shoebox, Evidence That Life Was Good. I'm telling you this so you understand what kind of woman Dorothy Mae Greer was, and so you understand exactly how much it hurt when I sat in an attorney's office 6 days after her funeral and found out she'd left me nothing. And then I'm going to tell you what she actually left me. Because my grandmother, 79 years old, 5'2", a woman who photographed Tuesday afternoon light, was several moves ahead of everyone in that room, including the cousin who thought he'd won. There were four of us grandchildren, me, my cousin Terrence, and two cousins on my grandmother's other side who lived out of state and visited twice a year at most. For all practical purposes, it was me and Terrence who were in her life. We'd both grown up in the same city, we'd both spent summers at her house, eaten her cooking, listened to her stories about growing up in rural Georgia with nothing but ambition and nerve. But Terrence and I were different in one important way. I loved my grandmother for who she was. Terrence loved my grandmother for what she had. She owned a house, a 4-bedroom craftsman in a neighborhood that had been working class when she bought it in 1987 for $74,000 and was now firmly desirable, worth somewhere north of $680,000. She had a modest investment account, some jewelry, and the accumulated contents of a life well lived. Terrence saw a number. He always had. Even when we were kids, he'd ask her questions that seemed sweet, like, "Grandma, what's this necklace worth? Where do you keep important papers?" That made my skin prickle in ways I couldn't articulate at 11 years old. I articulated it just fine by the time I was an adult. My grandmother was diagnosed with congestive heart failure 2 years before she died. It wasn't a sudden decline, it was slow, a long diminishment that she handled with the same practical grace she handled everything. She got her affairs in order, she talked openly about dying in the way that people who've lived fully are sometimes able to. She told me once, sitting on her porch in the late afternoon, "I'm not scared of going. I just want to make sure I go having done right by the people I love." I squeezed her hand. I told her she had. What I didn't know was that Terrence had started a campaign. I found out the details later, some from her attorney, some from neighbors who had seen things, some from a woman at her church named Miss Yvonne who told me everything she knew because, as she put it, "Baby, your grandmother deserved better, and so do you." Over the last 14 months of my grandmother's life, Terrence had inserted himself completely. He drove her to appointments, he handled her grocery runs, he sat with her on Sunday afternoons. All of which sounds like devotion, and I believe part of it was, but devotion was not the primary motivation. He also talked, constantly, quietly, persistently. He told my grandmother that I was busy with my own life and didn't think of her the way he did. He told her I'd said things about her house, that I'd called it a burden, that I'd mentioned wanting to sell it quickly. He told her I had financial problems that would put whatever she left me at risk. None of it was true, not a word. But he said it softly, over months, in the voice of someone who just hated to mention it but felt she should know. 14 months of that, to a woman whose hearing was going and who trusted her family. The will was amended 11 months before she died. I didn't know any of this when I sat in that attorney's office. What I knew was that my grandmother had left me her jewelry, her photo albums, and her kitchen table. Terrence received the house, the investment account, and the remainder of the estate. I sat there, and I did the thing where you smile and your face does what it's supposed to do, but inside you're somewhere very far away, very quiet, trying to understand what you're looking at. Terrence sat across from me with his hands folded on the table. He'd worn a suit. He looked like a man trying not to look pleased. He said, "I know this isn't what you expected. Grandma just felt that—" "You don't need to explain," I said. "Just saying her wishes—" "Terrence," I said quietly, "I heard you the first time." Something moved across his face, just for a second. I filed it away. The attorney, who had the uncomfortable energy of a man who suspected something was wrong but had no legal basis to act on it, handed me a padded envelope. He said, "Mrs. Greer asked that this be given to you personally. She was very specific. She said, make sure Maya opens that alone when she's ready." I took the envelope. I drove home. I sat in my parked car in front of my apartment building for probably 20 minutes, just holding the envelope. Then I went inside, made tea I didn't drink, sat at my kitchen table, not my grandmother's kitchen table, that would come later, and I opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a note card in her handwriting, big and looping the way it had gotten in her last years. "Maya, baby, I'm not as easy to fool as some people think. Watch this when you're alone. Then go see Earl Pemberton at Pemberton Law. He has a second envelope. I love you more than Tuesday Light. Grandma Dot." My hands were shaking. I found an old laptop, plugged in the drive. It was a video, 42 minutes long. I pressed play. My grandmother appeared on screen, sitting in her living room in her good chair, the one by the window. She was in a blue dress. Her hair was done. She looked directly at the camera like she was looking directly at me. "Hey, my Maya, if you're watching this, I'm gone. And I imagine you've just come from that attorney's office feeling like something doesn't add up. You're right, it doesn't. So let me explain." She had set up a camera herself. She'd asked the neighbor's teenage grandson to help her, swore him to secrecy, and recorded this video 8 months before she died. For 42 minutes, she talked. She talked about what Terrence had been saying to her. She named specific conversations, specific dates. She said, "He told me you called this house a headache. Maya, I've known you your whole life. You've never called anything I love a headache. I know exactly who you are." She talked about why she'd appeared to go along with the amended will. She understood by a certain point that Terrence was watching, checking, asking questions about her legal documents. She decided that confronting him would only make him more careful, and she wanted him care less. She said, "I didn't raise your mama, and your mama didn't raise you for us to let somebody like Terrence have the last word. That's not how Greer women operate." And then she explained what she actually did. 8 months before she died, my grandmother had visited Earl Pemberton, a retired attorney, an old family friend, someone Terrence had never met and had no reason to monitor. With Earl's help, she had placed the house in a trust. Not Terrence's name, not mine technically, a trust structured so that what Terrence received in the will was a 1/3 ownership interest in a property that could not be sold without unanimous agreement from all interest holders, and the other 2/3 were held by the trust, which named me as sole beneficiary and administrator. In effect, he couldn't sell the house without me. He couldn't refinance it. He couldn't rent it without my approval. He had received, after 14 months of careful manipulation, a 1/3 of a property he could do nothing with unless I agreed. The investment account she left him was real, roughly $40,000, which sounded like a lot until you understood that the attorney fees and taxes associated with trying to force a trust dissolution would likely consume most of it. My grandmother had looked at the board, thought 10 moves ahead, and built him a beautiful, perfectly wrapped trap. She said on the video, looking into the camera with those steady eyes, "He wanted this house. He can have his piece of it, but he'll never be able to do anything with it unless he comes to you. And when he does, Maya, you be fair, but you be firm. This is your grandfather's house. This is my house. Don't you let it go for less than it's worth, and don't you let him bully you into anything. You are a Greer. Act like it." She smiled at the end, that Tuesday afternoon smile. "I love you. Go get Earl's envelope, and make yourself something to eat. You never eat enough." Earl's envelope contained the trust documents, a separate letter from my grandmother to me that I'll keep private, and a handwritten note that said only, "She was something else, your grandmother. It was an honor." He wasn't right. Terrence called me 3 weeks later. He'd started looking into the house, realized something was wrong, had his own attorney review it. "What did she do?" he said. No greeting. "Hi, Terrence. Maya, what is this trust? My attorney says I can't." "I know what your attorney says." Silence. "This isn't fair," he said. I let that sit in the air for a moment. "Terrence," I said slowly, "I want you to think carefully about using the word fair with me right now." He didn't say anything. "Here's what's going to happen. The house will be sold. I'll handle the listing, the negotiations, and the closing because that's my role as administrator. When it sells, you'll receive your 1/3 of the net proceeds.
The trust receives 2/3. I paused. You'll walk away with somewhere between $180,000 and $220,000, depending on final price. Given what you did to get it, I'd call that more than you deserve. I didn't do anything. Okay, I said. She wanted me to have Terrence. My voice was very quiet. I had learned that from my grandmother. The quieter she got, the more serious things were. I have 42 minutes of her telling me exactly what you did. So we can keep talking, or you can accept what's being offered and we can both move on. Your choice. A very long silence. Fine, he said. Good. I hung up. Then I sat in my grandmother's kitchen. I'd been staying there to manage the estate, at her kitchen table with a cup of tea in the late afternoon light coming through her window. I took a picture of it on my phone. The house sold 4